This fairly brief video is about strategy execution and Harrison Consulting's proprietary model called the Double Eight model. Strategy execution is one of the four key value streams in which we provide support services, and you'll find a video on our strategy practice and credentials higher up on this page. Our start point, based on client feedback and the sorts of projects we've been doing recently, is based on current and highly respected work, which states that separating strategy from execution almost guarantees failure. There's no such thing as an excellent strategy poorly implemented, because if it was poorly implemented, then it was a poor strategy in the first place. This leads to buck passing, blame, and counter blame. In order to be considered excellent, the strategy must take account of direction, commitment, capability, culture, and resourcing. And if it doesn't provide for those, then it can't be considered to be an excellent strategy. And it leads to poor strategy to do it this way. So our model is summarized in the four phases: synthesize, communicate, align, and execute. And the first thing that you might notice about this is that it's not linear. It's a cycle. A couple of clients over the last 2 or 3 years have been working with us on this model, and we've come to the conclusion that linear models of strategy, such as you will see in many textbooks and academic articles, really leave it open to misinterpretation at all levels in the flow. I hesitate to mention the original name of the game where you put people in a line and give them a message to translate. Let's call it the chain of whispers. And the message that comes out at the end of the line is quite different from what was initially communicated. So we need rapid and continuous feedback loops built in to this process. So audit and synthesize, communicate and engage, align and execute, and feedback and adjust as necessary. This allows a dynamic strategy to be produced. Of course, there's an execution loop as well, which we would describe as direct, coach, measure, and reward. And those two loops need to operate in different directions so that they intersect like the cogs in machinery or in a car's transmission system. So to give you a little bit of background on that, there's a case study down the left-hand side in the call-out box on the left about a buying group in building supplies and hardware. Mirrored this process with some of their key suppliers, whom they called preferred partners or category partners, along with their expertise in category management, which we had actually helped them build a couple of years prior to this program. They were able to weather very turbulent industry conditions and built best-in-class partner relationships in key categories. What we can say about this, and that's actually fairly obvious if you look at this, is that the people who live in this group here, what you might call the first line managers who steward the execution, they have a critical role to play. And in some clients, we've actually been left with question marks, not so much about the commitment and buy-in from this group, but about their ability to recognize when things were not on message. And I'll mention something more about that shortly. So this is Harrison Consulting's Double Eight model. And it's important to stress that each circle in the figure eight model operates in at least two ways and perhaps three ways. The first is as a self-contained cycle in its own domain, use a better word, to synthesize, align, communicate, and execute downwards. And at the same time, simultaneously, the cog or circle evaluates the execution and provides upward feedback for adjustment. So that then cascades down to the next cog, which operates obviously in the opposite direction, And this second cog repeats the process, cascading the strategy down and starting the process of bubbling up skin in the game and feedback loops and responsiveness from the operational teams and individuals. So all three loops, and you can see there 2 figures of 8 intersected with that central cycle. All 3 loops comprise an integrated system, which obviously allows you to operate from the global or corporate level into the business strategy level, and perhaps to functional or operational level, and finally down to those at the sharp end, for want of a better word, who are responsible for delivering the value proposition to customers, clients, stakeholders, and perhaps society at large. So to summarize that, there's a color code of blue highlight downwards and green highlight upwards to indicate the downward flow of strategy and the upward flow of commitment and buy-in. Once again, we need to highlight the critical role of leaders and managers at these nexus points in the model. Key managers located at these nexus points need to demonstrate and model their commitment to the strategy cascading down. They need to interpret and communicate it to their team, brief their team for execution, monitor, coach and support their team, and of course provide timely upward feedback. So each level is responsive to those it is cascading the strategy to, and in fact people become way more engaged, way more motivated, and way more likely to take part in strategy with gusto and to understand why they're doing it than what previously may have been, as one of our authors calls, choiceless doers. Choiceless doers work out their own way of doing things because they don't believe that what they've been told to do is necessarily the best way to do it, and they believe that they've got a better way. And there are countless examples of little mini case studies in the various articles. And by the way, there's a list, a bibliography at the bottom of this page, and which you might like to consult, because there are links throughout this page in the text to those papers at the bottom of the page if you actually are thirsty for a bit of academic rigor and some of the granularity that I'm sure some of you would like to consult. So just once in a while we encounter not resistance at this level, but just a lack of ability to identify what success looks like. In one particular case study, and I think it's mentioned on the next drop down in the box on the left, an Australia and New Zealand, actually a New Zealand company, a reseller in the transport aftermarket, needed to align strategy and capability across 5 companies ahead of a very significant change of ownership that was on the horizon. So we worked with the senior team to help communicate the strategy down through general management. So we started at this level, as we generally do. We're not often called in at global, corporate, or merger and acquisition level. We don't consider ourselves to be Accenture or McKinsey. We tend to operate with hands-on management. We worked with the senior team, as it says there, to cascade this down and to work with, for want of a better name, let's call them branch managers in this operation. And when, after our program of what would have looked like training to an outside eye, but it was a darn sight more than training, because we were cascading down strategy in a consistent way through 5 companies at the same time. When our program, which had been done very rapidly over a 6-month period, originally planned to be 2 years, came to an end, we found that some of the implementation of this bottom loop was a little patchy, and we revisited the situation, and we tasked this level to task this level to communicate again the strategy and the capabilities. And we actually then continued our consulting through that process to observe and comment and coach zone management, regional management, and general management in working with their branch managers to work with their branch teams. It was a fairly involved process where we started in larger groups and broke them into successively smaller groups and coached them in implementing their not just training but the messaging, basically the messaging that was so critical. There is just on the tail of this presentation, just a comment about the link, or the not link, a sort of a similarity between Harrison's double 8 model and the double helix of DNA. Many clients wonder how leadership can ensure alignment and obtain buy-in from their resources in the organization, and we sometimes leverage Simon Sinek's exhortation of start with why, and one of the interpretations of his start with why golden circle is that his phrase is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Well, we believe the same thing applies to leadership and strategy. People don't buy strategy that tells them what to do, and they're far more likely to buy strategy that tells them why to do it. So if we put Sinek's golden circle in the center of each of the loops, then there is a need to align with purpose. And this actually reminds us of Steve Jobs, who's famous for actually saying that he's felt over the years, he's discovered it's far better to employ people and recruit people who share similar values and views and who fall in love with Apple. And he said that he wanted people recruited to the organization to do the best for Apple, not the best for Steve, not the best for themselves or their manager, but the best for Apple, because they loved the Apple brand and the Apple organizational culture. So if that's possible to align through here with the purpose of each of these loops, we haven't fully developed this concept yet, but this is something that's obviously going to be important, and again calls into focus the roles of the management groups at each nexus in the downward flow. Another point is about this DNA concept. Many clients actually talk about we need to get strategy into the DNA of the organization, and if you look at a parallel of the DNA, there may well be some scope for similarity. I mean, the difference would actually be that instead of these nexus points here, we actually have these linkages where the genomes and the chromosomes sit. And in fact, with the DNA, you might say that strategy is cascading down in this direction, and engagement and buy-in is bubbling up in this direction, and that these links keep those aligned and consistent all the way through. Once again, it's something that we're looking at. Are there some parallels here that we could use? But I think the philosophy, I guess, of what we're talking about here is I'm sure fairly self-evident from what we've been saying in this short video. Here are some of our strategic services. They are described in terms of the what, the why for why you might consider these services to support you is actually, I hope, illuminated in all of this short presentation. But let me just quickly roll out some of the what's. We can help you with audits to audit your strategic capability and your communication and execution of strategy. We can help with slightly more formalized benchmarks. There are some very good models available which have been developed. Some of you, many of you, most of you have probably heard of the McKinsey 7S model. You may not have heard of Jay Barney's VRIO model or Hubbard's ESC model. Hubbard's a very well thought of Australian strategy author. And we do run board workshops. Board workshops are a special type of activity where we chair and take notes and ask questions and play devil's advocate. But we don't teach anything. Please be aware that this is a facilitation process, and we generally lock people away for at least a day or 2 days probably in a weekend. Actually, it's often over a weekend. It's the sort of thing that needs to be focused on intently to get the value out of it. And typically we will have cross-functional people there from the senior leadership team to thrash out strategy. And remember, we're talking business strategy here, not operational topics like marketing or sales management or finance. We're talking about across those functional areas. And of course, a large part of our work is indeed sharpening strategic capability, improving strategy, communication and capability, and very, very important, the management and leadership processes to support all of that skill development. And finally, we can support with customized tools. And just finally, one little case study. In the case study of the automotive parts reseller, the aftermarket parts reseller, we actually found when we did some second round of research that the first line managers were, shall we say, some of them, not all of them were committed. All of them were fully supportive of what we were doing, but some of them were not able to identify, mainly because they hadn't been given really a template of what success looked like, or what on message behavior and on point skills looked like in the marketplace with their counter service staff, their field service staff, their field service managers. So we produced some video material, some customized video, which we filmed here in Australia and then took over to New Zealand. And this project worked across Christchurch, Auckland, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and continued to run for 8 months. In actual fact, we just managed to get it through in time, and gave these managers a far better understanding of what they were looking for in their people, and improved their overall understanding and buy-in of the strategy and the capabilities required to support it. Okay, so thanks very much indeed for watching this short video. It's probably better than trying to troll through all the articles that are listed below. My contact details are there. Feel free. Don't be shy. Give us a call. Don't be a stranger. And thanks again.